2 nights in a row. At midnight. It wasn't mild pain. It wasn't just another discomfort. It was pain so intense in her big toe that it jolted her awake, as if something were throbbing inside it, as if the pain didn't stay in the toe, but began to climb until it spread through her entire foot. She told me that night she sat up in bed, not understanding what was happening. She tried to move the toe. She tried changing position. She tried taking deep breaths, but the pain wouldn't at ease. She woke her husband. She didn't yet know what to do. She had never felt anything like this from a nail before. The toe was hot, swollen, extremely sensitive to the slightest touch. The only thing her husband could do was give her a painkiller, because seeing her like that in the middle of the night, unable to help her, was desperate. That night, she didn't sleep. The medication lowered the intensity a little, but the pain was still there, like constant pressure, reminding her that something wasn't seed right. The next morning, she thought maybe it would go away, but it didn't yet. When the second night fell, the pain returned with the same force, or even stronger. That was the moment she understood it wasn't normal, that it wasn't just a nail, that she couldn't wait any longer. Early the next morning, she messaged me asking for an urgent appointment. She was coming from another city, in pain, afraid, and without really knowing what was happening in her toe. What she still didn't yet know was that the pain wasn't coming only from the nail, but from something many people ignore, and that can hurt even more. When she finally arrived at the consultation, she was still trying to understand at what point everything had gone out of control. That's when she told me a detail that seemed insignificant, but explained everything. 2 months earlier, she had bought new shoes. Leather shoes. Rigid. Elegant. The kind that at first feel firm and well fitted. At the beginning, nothing out of the ordinary. She wore them for several hours a day. She walked. She worked. She followed her routine until she started feeling a small discomfort in her big toe. Not pain, discomfort, a mild pressure. Something she felt only at the end of the day. Something many people ignore. She thought the shoe was just stiff, that it would soften with use, that her foot would get used to it. So she kept wearing them. What she didn't know was that rigid leather, when it applies constant pressure on the edge of the nail, can slowly push it into the skin. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens silently. The nail begins to dig in millimeter by millimeter. The skin reacts. It becomes inflamed. It defends itself. But since the pain isn't strong yet, the body endures until one day it doesn't set. She told me she never imagined that a pair of shoes could end up waking her in the middle of the night with pain. And this is a very common mistake. Many people believe an ingrown toenail appears suddenly, when in reality, it's a process that forms over time. Tight shoes, constant pressure, improper nail trimming, and the problem begins to grow. If you share watching this video and have ever felt pain, pressure, or discomfort along the edge of a nail, pay attention, because what starts as something small can end up becoming disabling pain, and in her case, that silent process had already advanced further than she imagined. That's why, when the pain appeared so strongly at night, it wasn't a coincidence. It was the result of weeks of accumulated pressure. And what I found when I examined her toe confirmed that the problem was intent, just the nail. She told me that up to that point she had always considered herself strong with pain, that she had endured other discomforts in life. But this was different. The second night, when the pain returned, it was no longer just uncomfortable pressure. It was sharp pain, deep, as if something were digging deeper and deeper into her toe. She tried touching her foot, and the simple brush of the bedsheet was enough to make her shudder. The pain no longer stayed at the edge of the nail. It radiated, it climbed, it traveled through the entire toe, and began to be felt in the foot. That's when fear appeared, because when pain wakes you in the middle of the night, and you can find a position that relieves it, the mind starts thinking the worst. She got out of bed, walked slowly, tried soaking her foot in water, tried sitting down, tried distracting herself. Nothing worked. That was when she understood it was no longer something she could handle on her own, that it wasn't a matter of waiting until the next day, that it wasn't normal for a nail to cause that level of pain. The painkiller helped again, but only a little, just enough for exhaustion to overtake her body, but not enough to give her peace of mind. The next morning, the toe was still swollen, more sensitive, more tense, and then a very common feeling appeared in these cases: urgency. Urgency to seek help, urgency for someone to look at the toe, urgency for someone to tell her what was happening. That is why, when she messaged me, she didn't ask about prices or availability for another day. She asked for an urgent appointment, because when pain reaches that point, you don't think about aesthetics or time or distance. You think about one thing only: someone taking that pain away. And when she finally sat in the consultation room, and I was able to look at her toe calmly, I understood why the pain had been so intense. It wasn't just an ingrown toenail. There was something else involved. When I examined her foot carefully, everything started to make sense. The big toe was visibly swollen. The skin was red, tight, warm to the touch. The nail was ingrown on one of its edges. But that wasn't the only thing causing the pain. Around the nail, the skin was thickened, hardened, much more sensitive than normal. This is called onychophosis. Onychophosis is a reaction of the skin. When the nail applies constant pressure, the skin defends itself by producing more tissue, and that thickened tissue can hurt even more than the ingrown nail itself. That's why the pain wasn't just localized. That's why it radiated. That's why it woke her in the middle of the night. I explained to her that in many cases, people believe the problem is only the nail, when in reality, it's just the combination of the ingrown nail with the inflamed, thickened skin around it. That explains why the painkiller barely helped, because the source of the pain was still there. These types of cases aren't resolved by simply trimming the nail a bit. They require understanding which tissue is causing the pressure and how to release it without creating more trauma. She listened attentively. For the first time, someone was explaining why it hurt so much. And she also understood something very important. The pain wasn't an exaggeration. It was real, and it had a clear cause. After the evaluation, I explained exactly what we were going to do and why that procedure could relieve the pain immediately. Because at that moment, more than aesthetics, what she needed was relief. And that's when we began the procedure. Before starting, I asked her to take a deep breath. I explained that the main goal wasn't to do anything aggressive, but to release the pressure that was causing so much pain. We started carefully, without rushing, respecting every reaction of her body. When I worked on the edge of the nail, the response was immediate. The pressure began to ease. It wasn't a dramatic, instant change, but it was enough for her to notice. She told me she could feel the pain decreasing, as if the toe were no longer trapped. Then I worked on the thickened skin, that skin that had been forming for weeks, as a response to constant friction from the shoe and the nail. When that tissue was removed, the relief was even more evident. Here it's important to understand something. In cases of ingrown toenails with onychophosis, it's not enough to treat only the nail. If the skin that's creating the pressure isn't released, the pain can return. That's why these types of procedures must be done with judgment, not aggressively or improvised. As I continued, she stopped clenching her hands. Her body relaxed, her breathing changed, and then she said something you never forget in consultation. I don't feel that pain anymore. It didn't mean the problem was completely resolved, but it did mean the source of the pain had been treated. And when someone arrives in intense pain and begins to feel relief during the same visit, everything changes, because in that moment, fear turns into trust. There was still part of the procedure left to do, along with something just as important, explaining how to prevent this from happening again. As the procedure continued, she began to notice something very simple. She could touch her toe without the intense pain that had brought her there. There was still sensitivity, of course. That sits normal, but that sharp sensation was gone, that constant pressure that wouldn't let her rest. I explained that when the nail is properly released and the thickened skin is treated, the body responds almost immediately. Inflammation starts to go down, circulation improves, and the tissue stops being in constant defense. Many people think the pain from an ingrown toenail can only be eased with medication, but the reality is that if the mechanical cause of the problem isn't removed, the pain always comes back. That's why, as we worked, I explained what had happened in her toe and why the rigid shoe had been the trigger. The constant pressure didn't just push the nail, it also made the skin react excessively. That sep's what woke her in the middle of the night. That tip's what the painkiller couldn't solve. She nodded, like when something finally makes sense. She told me she never imagined that a problem that seemed so small could end up affecting her sleep, her mood, and even her daily life in such a short time. When we finished this part of the procedure, the toe was no longer tense. The skin looked more relaxed, and the expression on her face was completely different from the beginning. But before she got up from the table, there was something very important I needed to explain. Because relieving the pain is essential, but preventing the problem from coming back is just as important. Before she stood up, I wanted to explain something almost no one takes into account, and that is key to making sure this type of pain doesn't happen again. Many people believe an ingrown toenail appears overnight, but it doesn't. It's the result of small mistakes that accumulate over time. Shoes that are too rigid, narrow toe boxes, constant pressure on the big toe, improper nail trimming, and above all, ignoring the first signs of discomfort. I explained that the pain she felt in the middle of the night wasn't sudden. It was the final warning of a problem that had been forming for some time. When the body hurts at night, when it wakes you from sleep, it sees because it can no longer compensate. I also made something very clear. It's not normal for a nail to hurt. It's not normal for the pain to radiate into the foot. And it's not normal to depend on painkillers just to be able to sleep. That's not part of aging, but that's a warning sign. If you're watching this video and have ever felt pain, pressure, or inflammation along the edge of a nail, this message is for you. Don't wait for the pain to wake you in the middle of the night. Don't wait until the problem forces you to seek an urgent appointment. Addressing it early makes all the difference. She understood that, although the relief was immediate, the care had to continue, changing the type of footwear, giving the toe more space, and staying alert to any future discomfort. And when she stood up and placed her foot on the floor, she did it carefully, but without pain. That was the moment she knew she had made the right decision by coming. And what happened the next day confirmed that the procedure had been worth it. That same day, after finishing the procedure, she returned to her city. She left with clear instructions, with the toe protected, and, above all, with peace of mind. The next morning, I received a message from her. It wasn't that long. It wasn't technical. but it said everything. She wrote to thank me because she had woken up without pain, after 2 nights without sleep, after waking at midnight with unbearable pain, after not knowing what else to do but take a painkiller. She had finally been able to rest. For me, that is the true result of a well-done procedure. It's just not just correcting a nail. It's just giving someone back their rest, their calm, their quality of life. This case reminds me of something very important. Foot pain is not normal, and when it appears, it always has a cause. If you're watching this video and felt identified, if you've ever had pain from an ingrown toenail or discomfort you have been ignoring, don't let it go. And if you're interested in seeing more real cases, complete procedures, ingrown toenails, podiatric cleanings, and clear education about foot health, subscribe to the channel and join me. Here I share real stories, real procedures, and real solutions. Because many times, a pain that seems small just needs the right attention at the right moment.